Have you ever felt like you were doing everything right, and yet you were still losing? You followed the rules, you were polite, you were patient. You tried to be the best man you could be, and yet you were ignored, overlooked, passed over by people who weren't half as honest as you. Maybe no one told you, but this wasn't an accident. It was the system working perfectly. Society doesn't reward those who are good. It rewards those who are necessary, those who have control, those who know how to disappear and still move everything. Machiavelli understood this profoundly. He looked at kings, leaders, and generals as if observing the anatomy of power. He saw a pattern where others saw chaos, and what he discovered is brutal but real. The world doesn't respond to morality. It responds to strategy. You can be kind and be destroyed. You can be loyal and be discarded. You can be true and be betrayed. Why? Because most people aren't interested in how you feel. They're interested in what they can get out of you. And if you offer yourself completely, not out of force, but out of a desire to be loved, they won't thank you. They'll take. And when you have nothing left to give, they'll leave. How many times has this happened to you? How many times have you lowered your head to keep the peace? How many times have you kept quiet when you should have stood up for yourself? How many times have you tried to be understood when in fact you needed to be feared? This silent pain of seeing your kindness used against you is the pain of every man who still believes the world is fair. But what if I told you that you don't have to be cruel to be dominant? What if I told you there was a way to maintain your essence and still become untouchable? This is the breaking point. The moment something inside you breaks, and what grows in its place is something colder, more calculated, more silent. This moment is your rebirth. Machiavelli called this state the prince. Today we call it God mode. It's not a transformation to evil. It's a liberation from illusion. It's the moment you stop asking for space and start taking it up. It's when you stop seeking justice and start manufacturing consequences. It's the moment you understand that emotion isn't meant to command. It's meant to be tamed. You start to realize the game was always there. You just couldn't see the pieces, because since you were little, you were taught to be sweet, to be approachable, to be kind to everyone. But no one taught you to be respected. No one taught you to be afraid, to be silent, to be an enigma. And so you became legible, predictable, easy to ignore. The world didn't betray you. It just showed you that you were too visible. Machiavelli said, "Men in general judge more with their eyes than with their hands, because everyone can see but few can touch." What he meant was simple. When everyone knows who you are, what you think, what you feel, they can manipulate you. But when no one understands your mind, when no one can predict your reaction, you become dangerous. Not because you scream, but because you observe. And then the world starts treating you differently. You walk into a room and the air changes. You look, and no one wants to cross the line anymore. You keep quiet, and yet everyone corrects themselves. That's what this journey is all about. It's not about being respected by everyone. It's about being unattainable by everyone. Because respect is the bare minimum. What you want now is control. And control is not achieved with words. It is achieved with presence, with well-positioned silence, with ruthless and cold decisions, with the ability to not need to prove anything, and yet command everything. But here's the dilemma. To enter this state, you will have to kill a part of yourself. The part that still wants approval. The part that still wants to be understood. The part that justifies itself when misinterpreted. That part needs to die, and it hurts. Because for so long you believed that being good was enough. You believed that all you had to do was love and be loyal, and the world would be fair to you. But the world does not reciprocate the feeling. The world responds to perception. And if you look weak, you will be treated as weak. The first thing you need to accept is this. Your pain is no one's fault. It is a result of your distorted view of power. You thought being kind would make you valuable. But value doesn't come from what you feel. It comes from what you represent. And what you represent depends on how you are perceived. Machiavelli taught that it is better to be feared than loved, if one must choose between the two. But what he didn't say outright is that the feared can be loved. As long as love comes after respect, as long as love is not demanded, as long as you don't need it to feel whole. The problem with those who want to be loved is that they give in. They explain. They wait. But the prince doesn't wait. He acts. You are no longer in the world to be understood. You are here to be calculated, to be studied, to be avoided. And you will only achieve this when your presence begins to cause discomfort in those who were used to ignoring you. It's not about becoming a monster. It's about no longer being predictable. People around you need to start hesitating before asking you for something. They need to think twice before testing you. They need to feel that you've changed, even if they don't understand how or why. And that change starts now, not with a speech, not with an explosion. It starts in silence. It starts when you decide that your peace is worth more than the comfort of others. It starts when you understand that being good isn't enough. You need to be impressive, but the kind of impression that comes not from a loud voice, but from a firm gaze. It doesn't come from the number of friends, but from their selective absence. It doesn't come from the sincerity of what you say, but from the impossibility of knowing what you really think. You need to become the kind of man people aren't sure they can cross. The kind of man who never threatens, but also never forgives twice. And when that happens, you will no longer be part of the landscape. You will be the hidden center of gravity, the one around which everyone recalculates their steps. Your transformation won't announce itself. It will spread, like a rumor, as a doubt, like an invisible presence pressing on other people's lungs. Because when the world begins to fear you in silence, that's when you've won. But that requires a decision. Are you willing to give up the comfort of approval, the emotional dependence, the predictability of wanting to please everyone? Are you willing to build your image with coolness and intention? Are you ready to stop being a man and start becoming a myth? Machiavelli didn't write for the good. He wrote for those who understood that being good isn't enough. He wrote to you, but only if you are ready to kill the servant within you. Because from now on, there is no turning back. Or you become untouchable, or it goes back to being an erased name among thousands of others who never understood how the game really works. Have you ever noticed how the people who talk the most about themselves are usually the ones who control nothing the least? The more someone tries to be seen, the more dependent they become on the gaze of others. And those who need to be seen are never dangerous. Those who need an audience have already lost the game before it even begins. Excessive noise is the unconscious confession of those who lack true presence. Those who are truly powerful don't need witnesses. They transform the environment simply by existing. Most people want applause. They want to be recognized. They want to be understood. But you won't go down that path anymore. From here on, you begin to disappear. And not because you're running away, but because you finally understood that your absence is more powerful than your presence. That there's more power in withdrawing with purpose than in exposing yourself unnecessarily. Machiavelli didn't seek the brilliance of the court. He admired those who ruled the kingdom without sitting on the throne. Those who commanded silently, through perception, through calculation. He knew that true power isn't on stage, it's behind the curtain. He understood that the most feared ruler wasn't the most visible, but the most unpredictable. The one who moved like a shadow, but whose decisions illuminated or obscured entire destinies. Being invisible isn't about physically disappearing. It's about disappearing from predictability. It's about stopping acting as the world expects. It's about cutting the thread of emotional dependence that makes you respond immediately to messages, constantly try to explain yourself, and give explanations for your actions, your feelings, your thoughts. It's about erasing the map that allows others to know where and how to reach you. You've done it before. You justified yourself when accused, over-explained when you felt misunderstood, chased after someone when you felt like you were going to lose someone. All of this made you seem too human, and too much humanity, when it's predictable, invites exploitation. People instinctively test limits, and when they realize there are no consequences, they overstep their bounds. You need to be the man people aren't sure is still around. The kind of presence that continues to influence even when he's no longer in the room. The kind of man whose absence weighs heavily, whose delayed response creates tension, whose indifference confuses. Because a man who doesn't react quickly doesn't show urgency. And a man who lacks urgency isn't at a disadvantage. And no, this isn't about being cold. It's about being selective. Your time, your attention, and your words need to be worth more than the desire to be accepted. Machiavelli would say, "Men respect less those who show too much, because what is abundant is never valued. And when everything about you is accessible, your strength disappears. What is rare provokes caution. What is enigmatic provokes vigilance. When you begin to disappear from the ordinary, people begin to realize they no longer take you for granted. They stop expecting automatic responses. They begin to measure what they say because they no longer know what you'll tolerate or ignore. Uncertainty creates space for respect. Absence creates space for fear. And well-placed fear is what establishes order. Predictability is the breeding ground for manipulation. Do you always react the same way? Then anyone can lead you on. Do you open up too quickly? Then anyone can know how to dismantle you. Do you respond impulsively? Then anyone can irritate you and distract you. But if your reactions become muted, spaced out, and calculated, then others need to act more cautiously. And what happens when you break this cycle? People feel uncomfortable. They'll say you've changed, that you're distant, that you're strange. But none of these words are accusations. They're all signs that your presence is being felt differently. They're recognizing, albeit unconsciously, that something inside you has reorganized. Imagine a workplace, for example. Everyone speaks their mind. Everyone tries to deliver results. But there's that one man who's quiet, who never sells himself, who doesn't demand attention. He just observes. He only shows up when something needs to be resolved. People speak softly around him because they don't know what he's thinking. And that's precisely why they respect him. He's become a role model, even without seeking approval. Or think about relationships. Most men send numerous messages, explain their feelings, and make themselves available at any time. And yet, they're the first to be left. Meanwhile, the man who shows up less frequently, who doesn't try to prove anything, who maintains a certain mystery, he's the one who occupies the other's mind the most. His absence creates a constant presence in their minds. Strategic absence isn't disinterest. It's emotional dominance. It's showing that you don't chase, you pull. And if someone wants to be by your side, they'll need to learn to dance to your rhythm. They'll have to earn your every gesture. Because what's offered too much loses value. And if you think this is manipulation, you're wrong. Manipulation is lying to be accepted. This is the opposite. It's living so aligned with your values that you don't bend to please or convince. You simply exist. And the world responds to your frequency. A frequency that few understand, but everyone feels. Machiavelli said that those who need to be loved have already surrendered half their authority. Because to be loved, you give in. You avoid conflict. You adapt. But the man who doesn't need this, who can live well even when misunderstood, that's the man who begins to become dangerous. Because he doesn't depend on approval. He is self-sufficient. You must stop seeking visibility and start becoming inevitable. Visibility is exposure, inevitability is influence. You don't want to be remembered for shouting. You want to be remembered for making the world adjust quietly around you. You don't need to post everything you do. You don't need to recount every achievement. You don't need to respond to every provocation. Every time you don't react, you strengthen your image. Every time you maintain mystery, you expand the scope of other people's imagination. Think of someone who inspires you. Now ask yourself, is it because they're always visible? Or is it because when they appear, everything changes? True impact doesn't come from frequency, it comes from intensity. And intensity is born from contrast, from scarcity, from a presence that isn't constant, but always memorable. Your absence needs to be more intense than the presence of others. Your absence needs to occupy more emotional space than the insistence of others. When you are remembered even in silence, when your absence reorganizes behaviors, then you will understand what subtle mastery is. You need to learn to make silence speak, to make a delayed response generate tension, to transform disappearance into a heightened presence. And this is only possible when you let go of the urge to be noticed. The urge to be noticed is what keeps men stuck in the shallow game. You no longer want to be the man who does all the talking, who explains everything, who is always available. You want to be the man who, even when he says nothing, still dominates the room, who says little but whose words echo long afterward, who rarely appears but leaves consequences in his wake. Invisibility begins with simple choices, not responding to provocation, not justifying a change, not explaining your decisions, letting others think what they want, because the more they imagine, the more power you gain. And imagined power is harder to combat than visible power. People start to behave more cautiously when they don't know where you are emotionally. They test less, they talk less, they calculate more. They feel like they're dealing with something they don't fully understand. And what you don't understand, you respect. And that's where silent respect is born. Not the kind of respect that comes from shouting, imposed authority, or physical force, but the respect that comes from doubt, from mystery, from absence. It's the kind of respect that isn't asked for. It's imposed by the simple fact that no one wants to have you against them. Have you ever noticed that the most feared men aren't the ones who shout, but the ones who never have to raise their voices? That the most respected men aren't the ones who explain everything, but the ones who look and everyone adjusts. Their presence doesn't shout, it presses. This is the essence of the next level. Machiavelli didn't teach cruelty, he taught strategy. And the most powerful strategy will always be that of the man who knows how to remain silent, who knows how to withdraw, and yet remains in control. Because silence, when used well, becomes the loudest speech there is. Now you will become that man. You'll stop competing for attention. You'll abandon the need to be the center of attention. You'll begin to build a silence that weighs more than any words. A silence that precedes change, that anticipates consequences, that reorganizes behaviors. And when someone misses you, it won't just be for your presence, but for the order you bring when you appear, and the chaos you leave behind when you leave. Because the invisible man, when he dominates, no longer needs to be seen. He just needs to be remembered. This is the beginning of your disappearance, but also of your dominance. And now that the world no longer knows where you are, all it can do is adjust. You've come to understand the value of silence. You've learned that absence, when well placed, is worth more than constant presence. But now it's time to move forward. Because disappearing isn't the end, it's the beginning of something greater. You need to master an even more precise art, the art of reprogramming the nervous systems of those around you. Yes, you can change how others feel just by the way you move, the way you look, the way you remain silent. And this isn't theory, it's applied behavioral engineering. It's pure psychological power, activated by how you choose to position yourself. You no longer command by force, you command by sensation, by doubt, by a presence that disturbs without making noise. But what exactly is this feeling? It's what many call tension. A slight tension that arises when you're in the room, an unconscious state of alert. No one can explain exactly why, but everyone behaves differently around you. How does this happen? The answer is simple: conditioning. You've trained the environment to treat you differently. Now stop for a moment. Think about the people you avoid contradicting. Are they always the ones who yell? The ones who bang the table? Or are they the ones who say little but have a heavy look in their eyes? Why is some people's silence more valuable than others shouting? It's because your nervous system has been trained to react to their behavior. Maybe without realizing it, maybe over time. But today you think twice before crossing a line with these people. And if you think twice, you're already conditioned. Control isn't in the threat, it's in the anticipation of the consequence. You need to become that figure, the one no one wants to disappoint. Not out of physical fear, but out of psychological fear. Fear of being cut off, fear of exclusion, fear of being ignored. Because when you ignore, it hurts more than when you confront. When you walk away, it generates more impact than when you argue. And that's precisely what gives your silence its power. It carries invisible consequences. But how do you get to this point? First, by breaking patterns. If the people around you know how you react to each stimulus, you're predictable. And predictability isn't feared. So you need to become erratic, mysterious, silent in moments of outbursts, impassive when everyone expects your reaction. You need to turn the emotional game around. And that doesn't mean being apathetic. It means being surgical. You still feel, but you don't show it. You observe everything, but react with intentional delay. You let doubt brew in the other person before offering any response. Because doubt is the true driver of tension. Ever wonder why thrillers work so well? Because they hold the answer. They stretch the tension. They make you wait. That's exactly what you need to do with your communication. With your posture, with your gestures, turn waiting into impact. For every 3 conversations, leave 1 unfinished. For every 2 compliments, take 1 away. For every 3 decisions, make 1 unpredictable. You're not being confusing. You're teaching others not to expect control over you. And when they lose that control, they begin to respect you, because they begin to experience something rare, unpredictability with purpose. Have you ever noticed that the most influential people rarely explain everything? They say less than necessary. And because of this, every word they say carries more weight. This isn't a coincidence. It's a strategy. What's rare becomes valuable. What's scarce becomes desired. And when you decide to become scarce, you begin to shape the environment around you. Now imagine the following scene. Someone provokes you, expecting you to get angry as usual, but you smile and walk away. The provocation dies in the air. The other person feels small, confused, exposed, because your silent reaction defused the game. This is more powerful than any aggressive response, because it doesn't fuel the conflict. It transcends it. You need to understand. Every time you react emotionally, you reinforce the other person's structure. Every time you break that reaction, you destabilize the pattern. You are no longer an emotional player. You become an architect of reactions, a master of the climate. And the most interesting thing? This starts to affect even those you haven't even responded to yet, because reputation precedes presence. People will start saying, "He's changed. He's different. Better not mess with him." These phrases are the first signs that your new language, the language of tense silence, is working. But are you willing to pay the price of misunderstanding? Because this change doesn't come quietly. Some will call you cold. Others will say you've distanced yourself. Few will understand that you've simply repositioned yourself. You've stopped being too accessible and started being inaccessible enough to be respected. And this transition requires discipline, because the old you still wants to talk, wants to explain, wants to resolve everything in the heat of the moment. But the new you knows. Real impact comes from calm, from pause, from absence. You no longer respond to be understood. You respond to shape. Remember, your communication is no longer about generating empathy. It's about generating consequences. You no longer want to be understood. You want to be calculated. And when others start calculating you, they automatically adjust. Now think about how you enter a room. What does your presence communicate? What effect does your entrance have? Are you just another body in the room, or are you a point of silent tension that alters everyone's dynamics? You need to start conditioning the world to react to you. This is done with subtle patterns, with strategic pauses, with facial expressions that reveal no intention, with silences that say more than any argument. This is where commanding presence is born. And make no mistake, commanding presence isn't arrogance. It's emotional sobriety. It's knowing you don't need to compete for center stage, because you already are, even when you're silent. Especially when you're silent. But how do you create this presence? Start with internal control. Observe your impulses. Train your response delay. Retrain your body to avoid showing discomfort. And most importantly, eliminate the need for validation. Because as long as you need approval, you'll continue to operate in the realm of submission. Have you ever seen someone who commands without raising their voice? This person didn't learn it naturally. They trained. They broke the habit of explaining themselves. They learned to move like someone who has already won, like someone who isn't there to negotiate boundaries but to be respected in silence. Now it's your turn. You don't need to control with force. You need to control with tension. And tension arises from doubt, from rarefaction, from broken predictability. The less they know what you're going to do, the more alert they'll be. And their attention is your advantage, because attention is the new power. Whoever captures attention shapes behavior, and whoever shapes behavior dominates without saying a word. This is the new game, and you've just started playing it from the inside. You will no longer be the man who reacts. You will be the man who provokes reactions, and that is the beginning of true respect. Now let's see who can ignore you without feeling your absence as a constant noise in the back of their mind. Now let's see who can confront you without hesitation, because from today on, the simple fact that you are quiet will be enough for everyone to pay more attention to every step they take around you. Have you ever noticed how the most powerful are those who explain the least? There's a quiet strength in those who dominate without making noise, in those who command without raising their voice. The modern world is addicted to exposure, to shouted narratives, to emotions spread everywhere. But true control doesn't announce itself, it takes hold. And it is precisely here that we begin to unravel the art of absolute psychological control. Imagine someone who never defends themselves, never justifies themselves, never tries to convince. This person isn't silent out of weakness, but out of strategy. Because every time you explain too much, you kneel. And when you kneel, you lose ground. The man who doesn't need to explain himself creates around himself a magnetic field of mystery, of doubt, of strength that doesn't need to be validated. This man dominates the minds of others because he refuses to be deciphered. But why does this work? Because the human brain hates emptiness. When it doesn't have an answer, it invents one. And in inventing, it projects. And in projecting, it reveals more about itself than about the target of the projection. This means that by keeping your intention hidden, you force others to reveal themselves. And in this game, whoever reveals themselves first loses. Research published in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology demonstrated that in human interactions, those who speak less in a negotiation are generally perceived as more powerful, even when they hold no objective advantage. Silence, when used well, breeds submission, because it creates discomfort, and those who master discomfort master the pace. Have you ever tried this? Have you ever remained silent when someone expected your reaction? Have you ever refused to respond to a provocation? Have you ever ignored an attack without giving in to the emotion of retaliating? If you've done this, you've felt the impact. The other person didn't know how to act. They lost their script. And the moment someone loses their script, you take over. Think about interrogations. One of the most commonly used psychological methods by secret agents is silence. By not responding, not confirming, not denying, they force the other person to fill the gap. And those who fill the gap with words often reveal more than they should. Silence, well applied, is a precision weapon. And the most surprising thing? Silence isn't just a tool of psychological warfare, it's also a radar. When you stop filling the world with your presence, you begin to see who truly respects you. Who walks away when you're silent? Who tries to provoke you to bring you back into the emotional game? These are the ones who fear your evolution the most, because they depend on your predictability. There's a hidden pattern. Every time you disappear, those interested in controlling you appear. When you don't respond, the controllers expose themselves. When you stop being predictable, the manipulators lose control. This is no coincidence. It's a natural reflection of power dynamics. Most people are accustomed to relationships where everyone explains everything, where any silence is interpreted as a problem, where every disappearance generates insecurity. And because of this, when you break this pattern, you become an unattainable force. A common mistake is to think that being mysterious means hiding. It's not. Being mysterious means appearing when no one expected it. It means acting when everyone thought you were inactive. It means emerging with results when no one saw you moving. A Stanford University study revealed that more discreet leaders, who appear less and speak less, have a greater capacity to generate long-term influence. Why? Because their impact is not associated with a constant flow of stimuli, but with specific moments of transformation. And everything that is rare is valuable. Everything that is scarce is respected. Everything that is calculated is feared. Do you want to be remembered? Then stop showing off. Do you want to be respected? Then stop explaining yourself. Do you want to be uncontrollable? Then stop reacting. Your strength grows proportionally to your silence. The world is full of loud men, but empty of presences that truly make an impact. You don't want to be noticed, you want to be felt. And how do you build this? It starts with small denials, not responding to a comment, not justifying a change in behavior, not giving any clues about your next steps. You train the world to accept that you won't be easy to read. And over time, people stop asking questions. They start observing. And this is the territory of respect. Real-life stories demonstrate this clearly. Steve Jobs was known for his silent demeanor in meetings. Sometimes he would go hours without saying anything. But when he spoke, everyone listened. Why? Because the value of his speech was built on the weight of his silence. Another example, diplomat Henry Kissinger used silence as a form of negotiation. He would leave long pauses before responding. This forced the other person to back down, because silence creates anxiety, and anxiety breeds submission. You don't need to raise your voice, you need to raise your impact. You don't need to win debates, you need to win minds. And minds aren't won with arguments. They're dominated with presence. Your mission now is to stop trying to convince and start conditioning. Those who try to convince are in a position of inferiority. Those who condition define the game. And it all starts with breaking the emotional cycle. Because most men who lose power lose it because they react. They react to disrespect. They react to rejection. They react to provocation. And every reaction, even when it seems firm, is a response to the other person's expectations. And when you act on the other person's expectations, you've already lost. Machiavelli would say, "Those who appear affected lose authority, because emotion is the language of the weak. The man who controls his response controls the field." You need to understand that it's not your reaction that demonstrates power. It's your lack of reaction. It's not your response that creates impact. It's what it fails to reveal. Remember, every king who shouts too much loses the respect of the throne. Every leader who explains too much loses control of the narrative. Every man who wants to be understood becomes manipulable, but the man who is a constant enigma becomes untouchable. And now, the most important question: are you willing to be misunderstood to be respected? Are you willing to let others think badly of you, to maintain your strength? Because the price of invulnerability is this: giving up the need to be understood. This is the next stage of your mastery. No longer seeking answers, but generating questions. No longer screaming for space, but becoming the space. No longer begging for recognition, but becoming undeniable. From now on, your absence will speak for you, and your presence will be the silence everyone hears even when no one speaks. This is the true field of power, where those who say the least govern the most. You've come this far, and that means you're no longer the same man you started with. Something in you has been broken, and something else has begun to emerge. But don't think the process is complete. What's about to happen now is the final reconstruction. And it's not gentle. It's surgical, calculated, and brutal. It's at this stage that many turn back. They've realized the power of absence, silence as a weapon, unpredictability as a shield. But they still yearn for validation. They still have lapses of humanity. And that's precisely what needs to be destroyed now. It's not about killing emotion. It's about no longer responding to it like a servant. Most men are easily defeated because they have too many visible triggers. Touch their pride, and they explode. Touch their ego, and they lose focus. Touch their guilt, and they run back. Emotion, in the wrong hands, is a leash. He who sees it, pulls. He who feels it, obeys. And he who obeys commands nothing. Can you recall how many decisions you've made to protect yourself emotionally, even though it weakened you strategically? How many times have you stopped yourself from cutting someone off because you felt guilty? How many times have you kept quiet to avoid losing a bond? How many times have you insisted on keeping the peace despite being disrespected? None of these actions made you stronger. They simply revealed that your code was still emotional, not strategic. Machiavelli said that men err more out of goodwill than out of malice. And he was right. Many of the weak are not bad people. They are simply dominated by an emotional naivete that prevents them from seeing the game as it is. They want the world to be fair, for intentions to matter, for empathy to solve everything. But the game was not built for empathy. It was built for domination. Empathy is useful, yes, but as a tool, not as a guide. Those who feel too much hesitate. Those who hesitate lose. It's not about abandoning humanity. It's about using it as a disguise. You'll be cold in your decisions, but warm on the surface. You'll be calculated on the inside, but empathetic on the surface. This confuses, this opens doors, this unlocks trust. And when people finally realize that behind your cordiality there was a strategy, it will be too late. They will be exposed, and you will be in control. Think about how many times you felt anger and reacted. What did it build? What did it resolve? Emotion without structure is noise, and noise weakens. A man in noise reveals his weaknesses. A man in silence selects targets. Have you ever seen someone explode and then regret it? Have you ever found yourself explaining your feelings to someone who didn't care? Have you ever tried to justify a rational attitude with an irrational emotion? That's what weak people do. They want to be understood, forgiven, accepted. You won't want that anymore. You'll want only one thing: control. And control begins with distancing yourself, not just from the world, but from yourself. You will learn to see your own ego as the enemy. You will learn to remain silent when everything inside you screams for you to react. You will learn to observe when your soul wants to respond, because the one who responds is always predictable, and the predictable never scares. Remember, there's no mystery to an emotional person. There's only attachment, and attachment is the thread that pulls you back to mediocrity. So now is the time to cut that thread. Think of the most impenetrable figures you've ever met. The men who never revealed their feelings. The ones who were present, yet untouchable. They weren't distant out of weakness, they were distant out of strategy. A step back, always observing. A restrained gesture, always testing. A measured word, always calculating the impact. That's what you will become. Will this cost you? It will. You'll seem cold. You'll lose some connections. You'll disappoint those who expected an approachable man, but you'll gain something few achieve. Freedom. The freedom of not needing to be understood. The freedom of not begging for anything. The freedom of not justifying yourself. A man who needs to justify himself still lives for the eyes of others. A man who remains silent in the face of accusation, yet continues to grow, is the man everyone fears. You should no longer move to protect your own name. You should move to consolidate your own power. Your name, your image, your ego, all of that is peripheral. What matters is what you cause, not what you explain. When you master impact, you no longer need to explain yourself. This is where most people back down, because they miss the praise, the affection, the emotional peace. But emotional peace is the luxury of those who aren't at war. You are, not with weapons, but with perception. Not with violence, but with presence. Do you want to win? Then you must endure the discomfort of being misunderstood, of being perceived as cold, distant, arrogant, because every projection is a sign that the other person doesn't have access to your essence. And that's great. The less access they have, the more control you gain. Start asking different questions. Instead of asking, "Was I unfair?" ask, "Does this strengthen my position?" Instead of, "Did you understand me?" ask, "Does this have an impact?" Justice is an emotional concept. Impact is a real measure. You're not here to be fair. You're here to be effective. Machiavelli would say, men prefer to follow what impresses them rather than what convinces them. Because reason takes time. Emotion reacts immediately. Therefore, you need to be an event, something no one can ignore. And this is built with restrained presence, with selective speech, with disappearances that weigh heavily. Don't say what you intend to do anymore. Do it. Don't explain why you acted. Let them understand, or not. Your clarity isn't in what you say, it's in what you cause. If your absence paralyzes, if your speech redefines the environment, if your presence alters the dynamic, that's clarity enough. The rest is vanity. You no longer need emotional shields. You need silent weapons. And the most powerful of these is strategic indifference, the ability to observe without being affected, to listen without being shaken, to act without becoming agitated. Stop now and think, what in you still overreacts? Which stimuli still trigger automatic reactions? Who still manages to destabilize you? These are the enemy's entry points. Close them one by one. If someone ignores you, you don't react. If someone provokes you, you don't respond. If someone tries to belittle you, you grow in silence. Because silence, when charged with intention, is the greatest form of authority. You become untouchable when nothing gets you off track. And that's not coldness. That's inner mastery. You can feel everything, but you only act when the movement puts you in a better position. Emotion is impulse. Strategy is trajectory. You'll stop reacting and start planning. From now on, every time the world pokes you, it won't find the old you. It'll find a wall, an absence, a presence that won't bend. And little by little, you'll learn that you don't mess with those who don't react. Because those who don't react, plan. And those who plan, rule. This is the new stage. You're no longer the man who demands respect. You're the man who demands it without saying a word. You're no longer the man who justifies himself. You're the man who decides, and whoever wants to follow suit. If you were once the one seeking validation, now you're the one instigating silence. If you were once the one giving in to keep the peace, now you're the one silently moving the pieces until the other person understands who's in charge. You'll lose people. You'll scare others. You'll seem unreachable. But when the world stops trying to read you and starts adjusting to you, then you'll know. You've reached the point where no one can touch you anymore. This is the beginning of your ultimate power, and no one can stop you anymore, unless you start feeling too much again. So I ask, will you feel or will you master? The answer will define your reign. You've made it this far, and that alone separates you from most. Most give up halfway through, some don't even begin, but you made it to the end, not by chance, but because something inside you refused to be led any further. And now, after everything you've heard, the most important moment has arrived, the moment of action. And this action won't be superficial. It will need to touch your deepest roots, change age-old habits, and realign the way you see yourself in the world. Knowledge is useless if it isn't incorporated. You can understand everything about strategic absence, emotional control, unpredictability, and silence. But if you don't apply it, you'll remain predictable. And predictability is weakness. It's time to stop being a spectator in your own story. It's time to take the reins. It's time to become the author of your own inner empire. Start with the simplest, silence. From today on, before responding to any provocation, any comment, any message, wait, count to 5, observe, breathe. Every second of delay in reaction is an extra second of power gained. The world has become accustomed to immediate responses, and this makes you legible. You will become unreadable, because where there is mystery, there is room for respect. Then attack predictability. Restructure your routine, change your schedule, reduce your digital presence, change your patterns, disappear for days if necessary. The goal isn't to disappear from the world. It's to disappear from the predictable minds of others. When no one knows how you think anymore, you become dangerous. Not because of aggression, but because of the lack of external control. An uncontrollable man doesn't need to raise his voice. He simply exists, and others adjust. Break the emotional ties that still enslave you. It's not about abandoning your feelings. It's about not allowing them to determine your decisions. People who manipulate you for affection need to be cut off. Situations that trap you with guilt need to be ended. Feelings that drain your clarity need to be questioned. You are not your impulses. You are what you do with them. Emotional mastery is not the absence of pain. It is sovereignty over it. Establish a personal rule. Never explain yourself to someone who doesn't understand you. Explanations, in this case, don't bring you closer. They expose you. Let them think what they want. Respect is born when people realize they don't have access to your inner self. The more mystery, the more caution. The more caution, the more power. The empire of silence is built on the ruins of the need for approval. Apply selective presence. Appear where your absence is felt. Speak only when your words are more powerful than silence. Make your presence felt with impact, not frequency. Let each appearance of yours generate adjustments. Let each sentence of yours provoke reflection. Let each silence of yours be interpreted as a strategy, and each withdrawal of yours as a veiled threat. Don't seek more visibility, seek inevitability. And that takes time, discretion, persistence. The most respected men in history didn't get there by trying to be loved. They got there because they learned not to need love. They learned to live without applause, and precisely because of that, they became unquestionable. Love is good, but dependence on love is weakness disguised as sensitivity. Build your plan on 3 fronts: emotional, behavioral, and social. Emotionally, establish internal boundaries. What you feel is not what you do. Behaviorally, eliminate automatic reactions. Become unpredictable. Socially, control others' access to your essence. Let them see your surface but never what lies beneath. Your soul shouldn't be a showcase. It should be a locked vault. Be aware that this process will be lonely. You will lose people. You will find yourself in silence for days. You will hear that you are strange, cold, distant. But this is part of the transition. Only those who walk through the desert find their own strength. And the desert, contrary to what it seems, is fertile for those who have the courage to sow themselves in it. And this is where you have to make a choice. Will you go back to what was comfortable? Or will you continue, even alone, to the end? Most people aren't prepared for this path, but you're not the majority. And if you've made it this far, you can't go back. Because now you know too much. You've felt too much. You've awakened. And those who awaken don't return to sleep in peace. This is the point of no return, where everything you tolerated dissolves, where everything you were begins to die, where everything you will become begins to rise. Each step now is toward a level of presence that doesn't scream, but weighs heavily. A presence that is less about being and more about being. Emotional mastery, strategic invisibility, silent authority, inevitable influence. These aren't concepts to memorize. They're weapons to carry, and now they're in your hands. Use them. Train with them. Perfect yourself. Test them in small settings before tackling larger ones. And when you're ready, don't tell anyone. Just show up. Apply what you've learned. Question what you thought was right. Confront what you avoided. Be silent where you talked too much. Disappear where you were constant. Reappear as someone who no longer needs to be accepted, just acknowledged. And don't worry if you're misunderstood. Those who need to be understood live imprisoned by validation. But those who live at peace with their own silence no longer need to be explained. And remember, lasting respect doesn't come from force. It comes from a presence that doesn't bow, from a gaze that doesn't waver, from a word that doesn't repeat itself, from a man who doesn't beg. This man is built, brick by brick, silence by silence, absence by absence. If this resonated with you, I invite you to go further. Subscribe to the Deep Psyche channel. Like this video. Comment below, anonymously if you wish, about the experiences that challenged you most. I want to know what you faced, what transformed you, what still holds you back. Because this space isn't about ready-made answers. It's about awakening. And every story told here could be the push another person needs. Your journey is just beginning. And from now on, it won't be about being noticed anymore. It will be about being remembered. And more than that, it will be about being avoided by fools, imitated by the mediocre, and respected by the silent. Thank you for making it this far. Now, the world needs to learn to deal with its silence. And you need to learn to never waste it again.